Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we take on the dense manuals and regulations to pull out the practical knowledge you need. Today, we're jumping into the administrative heart of the patent world, the MPEP.
That's right. Specifically, MPP Chapter 2500, all about maintenance fees. And we're really drilling down into one section, 2540, which covers something called the fee address.
The fee address. It sounds so simple, almost boring, but I get the feeling an error here could be catastrophic for a patent owner.
Oh, absolutely. Our mission today is to show you why this isn't just paperwork. This one administrative detail dictates where the USPTO sends all the critical notices about keeping your patent alive.
And more importantly, who's on the hook if those notices get lost?
Exactly. We're finding the mailbox, and we're talking about what happens when that mailbox is out of date.
Okay, so for anyone listening who's maybe just had a patent issue or is managing a portfolio, let's start with the default. If I don't do anything special, where are my renewal notices going?
By default, they go straight to the correspondence address that was used during prosecution.
So to the law firm or the attorney who helped me get the patent in the first place, which I guess makes sense at first. But what happens after the patent issues? Things change.
They almost always do.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the danger is. That prosecution attorney might move firms, you might bring management in-house, or hire a totally separate service just for annuities.
And if that old address is still the default, those reminders, they could just go into a black hole.
Precisely. Which is why the MPP gives you a way to establish a totally separate dedicated fee address. It's a vital tool for managing long-term risk.
Okay, separation is the goal here. So how do I do it? What's the procedure?
You've got two main windows of opportunity. The first one is the easiest, the most efficient.
When's that?
It's right at that moment you're paying the issue fee. That, celebratory moment where the patent's actually going to be granted.
Right. So as I'm sending in that final payment,
Yeah.
what do I do?
You'll submit a specific form, the fee address indication form. The official number is PTOS B47. You just attach that directly to your issue fee transmittal.
Which is the PTOL 85B, right?
That's the one. And actually, here's a useful tip from the source material. That PTOL 85B form does double duty.
Oh, really?
Yeah. There's a spot on it, item 3, where you can also list assignment data. So in that one filing, you could pay your fee, set your future fee address, and get the ownership printed right on the face of the patent.
That is really efficient. But let's be realistic. What if I missed that window or, 5 years later, my company moves?
And that's the second window, which is probably more common. You could update the fee address at any time after the issue fee has been paid.
How does that work? Same form?
Same form, the PTOS B47. But this time you file it directly with the USPTO's maintenance fee branch. And a word of warning here, the MPEP is really clear. Always use the current version of the form from the USPTO website. They do change.
Okay, so it sounds pretty straightforward. Fill out a form, send it to the right place. Is there anything else I need to know? Any hidden requirements?
There is, and this is a big one. It's the mandatory customer number requirement.
A customer number? Why is that so important? Why can't I just give them my company's mailing address?
Because the customer number is all about standardization and, frankly, sanity. Imagine you have 100 patents.
Okay.
If your office moves, do you want to file 100 separate change of address forms? Or do you want to update one single record that's tied to all of them?
Oh, wow. Okay, I see the logic now. It turns a huge headache into a single action.
Exactly. The customer number is the ID for your entity. You update the address linked to that number once, and it automatically updates the fee address for every patent associated with it.
So if I don't have one when I file that fee address form,
Then you'll need to file a request for customer number, which is the PTO's B125 form. The truth is, though, the USPTO's internal system represents all fee addresses with customer numbers anyway for their own consistency.
got it. Okay, so we have the forms, the addresses, the numbers. Let's pivot to the consequences. What is the single biggest non-negotiable rule here that every patent owner needs to burn into their brain?
That paying the maintenance fee on time is entirely the patentee's responsibility. Period.
That seems fair, but what does that really mean in practice? What does that let the USPTO off the hook for?
It lets them off the hook for making sure you got the reminder. The USPTO is very explicitly not obligated to send you reminders.
Wait, really?
Yes, they do it as a courtesy. But if that courtesy notice gets lost, if it goes to an old address, if your mailroom loses it, that's your problem.
But hold on. If I filed a change of address and they sent it to the old one anyway, isn't that an administrative failure on their part? Shouldn't there be some kind of grace period?
You'd think so, but no. This is the legal hammer of the system. Failure to receive a reminder for any reason does not excuse a late payment, and it will not stop your patent from expiring.
That is incredibly strict. Is this just a policy or is there legal precedent for this?
Oh, there's major precedent. The sources point to a specific case, Rydeen v. Quigg.
Now, what did the court say?
The court was crystal clear. It said that even if the office makes a mistake, even if they fail to send a notice, that does not shift the ultimate burden of responsibility away from the patent owner. Diligence is your job, not theirs.
So let me get this straight. I could have a patent that's the foundation of my entire company, worth millions. And if I mess up a simple address update, the reminder gets lost, I miss the deadline, and I fail to pay a few $1,000s. That multi-million-dollar asset is just gone, and I have no legal recourse.
That is the stark reality.
Yeah.
That's precisely the situation that all these forms and procedures in MP 2540 are designed to help you avoid. The system is a tool, but if you neglect the tool, the failure is fatal, and it's all on you.
It really changes how you see those forms. They're not just bureaucracy, they're your liability shield. And it makes that customer number system seem absolutely essential.
It is. It's your best defense against administrative chaos. Centralize your portfolio under one customer number, keep that one record meticulously updated, and you dramatically reduce your risk.
So recapping the key steps for our listener. 1. Know that the default prosecution address is a risk. 2. Use the PTO-SB 47 form to set a dedicated, stable fee address. And 3. Lock it all down with a customer number.
That's a perfect summary. It's all about being proactive. The USPTO gives you the infrastructure, but the responsibility never, ever shifts.
Which brings us to our final takeaway. The system is built to help you, but as Rydeen v. Quigg shows, it will not save you from yourself. Proactive management of your fee address and customer number isn't just good practice. It's the only way to guarantee you keep your patent rights.
And here's a final thought on that. We've been focused on the fee address, but remember, the default is the general correspondence address from prosecution. This whole section just reinforces a broader theme. You have to maintain accurate contact info across the board for the entire life of the patent. If you let any of it get stale, you're just inviting risk.
A sobering but absolutely critical piece of advice. Thank you for breaking that all down for us. We would also like to extend a special thank you to Mike Shepard, the creative director who organized this entire audio series. And a final word. This summary of the MPEP was generated using AI tools, including ChatGPT and NotebookLM, and may contain errors or omissions. It is provided for general educational and informational purposes only and is not legal advice or a substitute for formal instruction. For authoritative guidance, please consult the official MPEP, a qualified instructor, or a registered patent practitioner.